Grow your practice, grow your wealth, grow your impact. Find out how to spend less time in the dental chair and more time on the things you love.
Welcome back to the Dental Wealth Podcast. Glad to be back. I wanted to just talk to you today about the difference between transactional and relational consulting. And it's really important for you to hear this. I feel that everyone that I talk to now is doing some type of consulting. And I talked to someone recently who had a culture consultant, which I didn't even know there was such a thing. But I guess some people are just coming in and doing culture consulting. So there's consultants for everything, it seems like. So I want to kind of just take a moment and build the difference between and talk through the difference between transactional and relational. It's really important you get this. And I would talk to anyone that I had in my practice about the difference. So, and let's talk about the pros and cons a little bit so you understand what I mean. So transactional consulting, there's some large consulting firms that are purely transactional. What that means is they literally are breaking everything down to such a science that they really don't care about the patient. I know that's really, I gotta be careful how I say that. I know when I'm saying that, when I'm saying they don't care about the patient, I don't mean that they don't actually care. What I mean is the patient becomes a number. The patient becomes and so do team members, by the way. These type of companies use words like human capital and it's very much a very transaction. If one person comes, the other person leaves. You do things like incentive pay. And look, let me tell you about incentive pay, and I won't get into I could do 5 podcasts on incentive pay. But understand the idea of the incentive pay is the idea of I don't really want to manage my people. It's really, incentives are basically in replace of management. That's why you pay salespeople, outside salespeople especially, an incentive so that you don't have to manage them, because if they don't produce, you don't pay them. So what these companies come in and do is they come in and they do transactional type work. Let me show you how to get 100 new patients in a week, right? I think I get LinkedIn. I think they think I'm a dentist. So I get these LinkedIn comments about how do you grow 100 new patients in 12 seconds or something, right? And so they don't care about what type of patient. They don't really, it's really about how you can feed as many people through the treadmill, the machine, the mill, however you want to think about it as possible, right? And there is a model, right? It's almost in a sense like the Walmart model, right? We're just going to feed as many people in as possible, and we'll squeak out profit as much as possible, and we'll just run this thing like the well-oiled machine might be kind of in a sense the way to look at it, because we don't care about people. And yes, it does make me think of like Scrooge McDuck a little bit, but it's like this idea of flash in the pan. Increase revenues, right? I'll increase your revenues in the next 30 days mentality. And why am I talking about that? Because I think you've got to be aware of this, right? As a CEO, I think you need to be aware of what's in the marketplace, and so that you can be smart and you can be the one who's looking out for this type of approach. Now, you might be listening to this going, hey, I love that approach. And you got to understand, if you want that approach, it's fine. You need to know the goods and bads of it, right? And so if you're going to have a transactional type approach, you're going to have high turnover. You're going to have low morale. And the model is short term. Okay, so you would use a transactional model in a model where, for instance, you were trying to sell in the next 12 months and you were just trying to get revenues peaked through the roof. You didn't care about your team. You didn't care about the patients. You didn't care about the patient base. You were looking to sell to some DSO, or you were looking to sell to somebody else. And you just simply said, I am going to take my model and I'm going to push up revenues as fast as possible. I'm going to fire anything that is, any person that is not, that's, affecting my profitability, because I don't care about long term. And, I'm going to, and then I'm possibly going to sell out, or sell off. So you could see a place from a business standpoint where that could work, right? Where you would see a transactional type model. And so you can push short-term revenues up. And so there's a lot of consulting companies, by the way, who will sell purely transactional models. By the way, some of them are very large, so you got to watch out for this. They'll sell transactional models And I need you to know something about transactional models, okay? There's very few bad products, whether it's insurance, whether it's dental, whether it's investments, whether it's business consulting. There's very few bad products. There's bad approaches, okay? Bad applications. So what ends up happening is when you have a bad application to a process, you can use something like that. Now, I'm going to tell you why I don't recommend that, but I'm going to tell you why somebody would use it, because I want you to be able to look out for that, and why Tyler Leadership does what we do, and what are the difference between approaches. Now, this is not just good or bad. I don't want to do black or white, and that's just too simplistic. It's too elementary to say one's good and one's bad. I want you to think of it like this. A transactional approach is a short-term flash-in-the-pan approach to simply grow revenues for the short term, and you would usually do it prior to an acquisition, okay? It's to make the company look as profitable and healthy as possible. Make sure I make this clear. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just letting you know and trying to be somewhat objective in the conversation. That is a transactional model. What happens is that companies are selling transactional models, short-term transactional models, as a long-term approach to doing business. And so they'll sell you numbers and start telling you, hey, we're going to do revenues so we'll increase new patients without putting another dollar in marketing, and we'll grow profitability, and we'll grow this and grow that. And you'll hear, by the way, you want to watch out for them? Watch this word, grow, 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 grow. It's the first indicator that you might be talking to a transactional company, is when you just hear the word grow. If it's just literally grow, 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 you're probably talking to a transactional company who has a transactional approach. But think about this for a second. Of the Fortune 500, something like 80% are less than 20 years old. That's a powerful number. See, transactional can work in the short term. And paying people for smiling and doing their jobs can work in the short term. And all these bonus and incentive plans and all this kind of flash in the pan, new patient type stuff can work in the short term. And as long as you're looking for a short term approach, it can apply. But you need to be like scalpel, not machete. If you're looking for a business, so just kind of think about that. If it's a very, very short-term, very short-term, you might be looking at a transactional approach. But transactional approaches, I want you to write this down. Transactional approaches do not have strong long-term gains. Transactional approaches do not have good long-term gains. The reason why relational, so transactional versus relational, that's transactional. And relational is really when you do something completely different, which is more of my approach, but it's more of the approach that really creates long-term businesses. In a relational approach is when you're looking for the long term, when you're really trying to build a long-term team. When you're trying to build a leadership team, when you're trying to invest in people and leaders and long-term leaders, and you want to have impact, and you probably want to keep the practice. You might want multiple locations. You want to do this for the long term. You want people to be happy when they come to work. You care about morale. You care about the patient's quality. When you look at those things, that's a relational approach. Relational approaches take more management, and they take a little bit longer to have a relational approach to your business. See, the problem is, and it goes back to the same thing again, people want a relational business, but they treat it transactionally. And we can kind of relate this to a diet for a minute, right? So it's like people want to stay thin long term, but they want a transactional approach. right? If I just eat, fat all day long, whatever, keto or, whatever, then I will lose the weight. Well, that's not a great long-term approach. It's transactional. Does that make sense? So you're doing a transactional approach. And so, by the way, remember how I told you transactional can work for a short term? Well, look, let's assume that beach season's coming and I just want to look good in my swimsuit or bikini or whatever it is, right? And so you're trying to transactionally lose 20 pounds. And so we do this short-term approach because we know we'll look good on July 2nd or whatever when I'm going to be wearing my bathing suit. But I know it's not long-term. It's not sustainable for long-term. I know, and I've got to be smart enough to realize I can't eat like this forever, right? This is a transactional type approach to my health. If we want long-term success, right? I want to not only look good now, but I want to look good 5 years from now. I want to look good 20 years from now. I want to always be looking bikini ready or swimsuit ready. If I want that, then I've got to use a different approach. And I'd go back and relate this to business, which is more the relational approach. It takes more concerted effort. It takes more management. But once the process is in place, you see long-term results and you have long-term gains. You tend to stay healthy, stay fit. And the same thing happens with the relational business approach. As a relational business approach makes people happy in the culture for a long term. It makes the business profit and growth. Organizational health, by the way, has a gigantic contribution to profit and growth for the long term. So when you build a relational company, you tend to have year after year after year after year after year after year of growth, and year after year and year after year after year after year of profit increase and net worth increase and all these, right? I mean, long-term success. I mean, you wake up, you have this amazing business that runs by itself. You love being part of it. Your team loves being there. People are high-fiving. The culture's great. And it takes more time, right? It takes more time, just like it would take more concerted effort around a long-term health plan versus a flash in the pan. See, the problem with flash in the pan diets is they don't work, right? How many people do you know have been on keto for 5 years, right? It's not realistic. And so what ends up happening is the same thing happens to our business approaches. We allow people to come in and tell us they're going to make us a millionaire, or that they're going to increase revenues overnight, or they're going to create some massive growth overnight. And we don't even know, by the way, someone tells us we're going to grow. We go, that sounds great. We don't even know why we want to grow. See, that's the difference between transactional and relational. See, transactional just says you're going to grow. Relational says, why do you want to grow? Who do you want to impact? What life do you want to change? What would you like to do with the growth? See, it's a different way of looking at it. One's very shallow and one's very in depth. And so far, I hear all the time people being trapped and sucked into transactional conversations and transactional approaches. But I will tell you that they never work long term. They weren't designed to work long term. They're not going to work long term. And if you buy a transactional approach from some consulting company looking for long-term gains, you're making a mistake. So if you're going to buy a transactional approach, you need to realize this is a transactional approach. The problem is the companies that are peddling this don't even realize that they're selling a transactional approach. Most of them, they don't have the business acumen to really understand that their approach actually does have a business application and strategy. By the way, I'm not beating up on anyone. I want you to understand this is not a good versus bad. Remember, I told you that to start this podcast. It's not a good versus bad. It's just, what do you want? And so if you want a transactional business, it's for the short term. It's a very short term process. Understand you're going to typically lose morale. You're going to lose culture, and you're going to have a lot of turnover. And but you might be doing it for the short term because you're looking for a sale, some kind of an acquisition of your dental practice. Where relational is you want to keep it for the long term. You want to have an amazing place to work. You want profits and growth to go up continually, but it takes more management and concerted effort. I want you to think about this in your business and say, are we running a relational approach to growth or a transactional approach to growth? we all have to pick a method, right? And if you look at, right, and we can, by the way, we can look at this cross industry. We can look at different industries, whether we look at hotel chains, whether we look at grocery stores, whether we look at, right? I mean, we can do this in retail markets. There is a concerted effort to be transactional or versus relational. The problem with transactional also, remember, if you're a transactional business, you typically have to be at the low priced point, okay? You have to have a low price point in the market. So you just need to understand that. It's a low price point, where a relational business is high price point. Transactional, low price point, lots of quantity. So it's high quantity, low cost, where relational tends to be less quantity, right? It might have less people, but paying a lot more money. And so what ends up happening is with a relational business, you tend to have happier patients and happier people and happier team. And so that's why you end up having long-term gains, is because you have a team who's around you trying to build something amazing. And you're not trying to do that in a transactional business. So I want you to think about that. What model are you running? Are you running a transactional business model, or are you running a relational business model? Now, I certainly have my opinion which one works best, which is why I created Tower Leadership. But I think in the marketplace, as you listen to this, I want you to just know that there is a difference. They're not the same. And I want you as the dentist to be listening to people when they go to speak or when they go to sell you something. And I want you to have the knowledge. I mean, the point of me doing this podcast is so you have the knowledge, so when someone's in front of you, I mean, that's one of the things I want to do, is educate doctors so that they know what they're listening to, and they can be the ones that go, I understand what this person's trying to sell me. They're trying to sell me a transactional approach. I don't have a transactional business, and I don't want to have a transactional business, then don't buy that approach. I have a relational business, and I want to buy relational consulting and relational advice that helps me have a long-term approach to success. By doing both of those, right? So now all of a sudden we can make informed decisions. The worst thing you can do is have a relational business and begin a transactional consulting firm. You will destroy an entire culture. I'll give you an example of what I mean by this. I had a dentist one time call me up on a Saturday, and he had paid something crazy. I think it was like $30,000-$40,000 for some incentive pay, transactional pay scale, and you know, they were going to come in and redo all the pay and come up with some complex transactional type program, and it was going to help. You know, the idea was it was going to help people get paid more, but it's going to push up revenues. But see, he had a relational business. The team members loved where they worked, and they were getting paid well, and they were doing well. And he didn't need to bring in a transactional approach. And he had called me because he said, Eric, I spent all this money on this program, and I thought that everybody would be happy, but Eric, my turnover is going through the roof. Everyone's miserable, and they hate the job. And I said, that's because you thought people come to work for money. And they don't. Study after study after study shows us that's just not true. So that's what ended up happening. This person used a transactional approach to a relational business model. And it took him 3 years, I think, to unwind it, by the way. It's a complete nightmare for him. And that's why I'm trying to tell you about it now, because I don't want you to end up in the same situation. We all get excited about revenue. We all would love to lose 5 pounds, 10 pounds overnight. We'd all love to grow revenues and double overnight. We'd all love to blah, 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 fill in the blanks. Great businesses take time. Great businesses are a concerted effort over a period of time. They're not transactional. Transactional is about flipping a company. It's about utilizing a company to make $1. It's not what a relational business does. And I would venture to say the vast majority of people listening to this are relational focused. And so very, very, very careful. Guard your doors. Guard your doors and make sure that people don't come in with a transactional approach to a relational business. And make sure you know the difference and you're looking out for them. Look, a relational business is the key to long-term success. in any business, and especially a service industry, and especially a dental practice. Thanks for listening. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Go out and do great things with the information. If you love this, hey, do me a favor, tell a friend. This is a passion, right? And I charge quite a bit for individuals I work with, but I want to put messages out that people to hear because I love dentistry, and this is my ilk, so to speak, my tribe. I love dentists because they care about taking care of other people, and that's why I'm so called to this industry. If you know someone who needs to hear this message, do me a favor, just forward them a link to the podcast. Think of someone right now who could listen to this message, or maybe who have gotten caught up with a transactional company, and maybe forward it to them so they can hear the message. Hit subscribe so you get updates when we send out something new. If you're listening on YouTube, click subscribe on the channel. We'd love to have you. You got to take the content. One of the greatest things about podcasts these days is that we're getting exposed to information we used to pay a lot of money for. And while not all of it's deep dive, a lot of it is very, very helpful. And I hope this podcast is helpful as well. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.